Starting instead, I'm Matt Cox, a member of our Lancet Care team. Lancet Care is a managed service solution where we remotely administer MicroStrategy environments for different clients. And our clients range from, in sizes as far as the service we provide, from just a couple hours a week to our largest being 5 full-time employees administering the environment. So besides that day-to-day administration, we also perform a number of ad hoc project tasks. So things like security audits, enterprise manager workshops, installations, and of course what's pertinent for today, upgrades of MicroStrategy. And we've been having a lot of questions lately about upgrading, and obviously in particular to version 9. It's a combination of beginning of the year budgets as well as the highly anticipated release of version 9.01 that we expect within the next couple weeks here. So we've been fielding a lot of questions, and so we thought it'd be a good time to host a webinar and help kind of answer some of those questions for everybody. And we did a couple of these in December, and they were well received, so we thought we'd do 2 more. So we did one yesterday, and then today's our final version 9 upgrade webinar. We've been doing a number of single server upgrades for a number of our single server customers. And some of our newer customers, the idea there was, if you've recently installed MicroStrategy, let's get you up on version 9 so you can start using distribution services as opposed to getting too comfortable using narrowcast services. And then some of our larger customers, the upgrade process is just a little bit longer. Maybe there hasn't been as much, more planning goes in place, so a lot of them maybe are waiting for 9.01, but we have gone through an extensive beta testing of the 9.01 upgrade and a lot of the features with one of our largest customers. So we've gotten good experience and good feedback from that project. As far as the agenda for today, this will not be a step-by-step technical discussion on how to perform an upgrade. We will go over at a high level the steps that we recommend for an upgrade. But you know, MicroStrategy has done a good job of making the upgrade process rather simple, rather straightforward, pretty automated. They're able to update all the metadata objects through a wizard. So really, what we found is good planning and a detailed validation plan will help dictate the success of an upgrade. So we want to spend a lot of our time talking about planning and preparing for the upgrade and validating. So just stepping through the agenda, we'll talk about briefly talk about some of the new features in version 9. We'll talk about things to consider as you're planning your upgrade and prepare. We'll step through the high-level steps for the upgrade, and we'll talk about some of the things that we've learned so far in our upgrades. And the goal will be to get done in about 30 minutes, and then unmute everybody, open it up for questions and discussion. So we're hoping that, some of you may have already upgraded. Yesterday we had somebody who had upgraded to version 9.0 already on the call, and so everybody has a different level of experience with version 9, and so you may have insight that we don't have, and it'd be great to start any discussions. So as you're going along, if you think of any emails or any questions, go ahead and chat them to us or email, and we'll address those afterwards. Otherwise, we'll just open up the phone lines afterwards. So a couple areas to consider that we won't get to in detail. Today we'll be stepping through the steps to perform the upgrade and validation, but there's some other areas that every customer handles a little bit differently depending on the size and your user community. So we won't get into a lot of detail, but we'll just mention these things to consider when planning your upgrade. First one is end user training. So there's a lot of new features, functionality in version 9. Having a plan for how you're going to roll those out to your customers or to your end users. And then impact assessment. So how will this upgrade impact how your users use MicroStrategy? It may be as simple as some cosmetic changes. There may be users that now will be able to do all their functions on the web as opposed to needing a desktop install. And maybe as part of the upgrade, you're able to deliver more through delivery through distribution services and narrowcast as opposed to requiring people to actually log in. So just considering that impact and how it affects your end users. Another important change with version 9 will be a potential change to your change management process, the way you migrate objects through development, test, and production. And we'll talk about object packages in more detail in a couple slides here. Adoption measurement is something that we recommend customers are always doing. So tracking your users, finding out those users that use MicroStrategy for a little bit and then stop using it, find out why they stopped using it. And the reason that's pertinent for this upgrade discussion is if you're not measuring now, it'd be good to start measuring that. And then also to consider how you can compare your user adoption after the upgrade as compared to before. So you're delivering more functionality, better, more up-to-date software version for your end users, and hopefully you'll see that adoption increase as well. We always recommend you have a documented test plan in place. If you don't have that, this is a good time to, as you're going through this upgrade, for both the technical and the project teams to step through and document all the steps that they do for validation, and you can reuse those steps in future upgrades. And we encourage you to consider your communication planning, so how you communicate out project plans to both your end users as well as your validation teams. And then any other end user impact. So how does this upgrade fit with your users? Obviously, you don't want to schedule it for year-end inventory count or a big end of a sales cycle, things like that that might impact your end users. So let's briefly talk about some of the new features in version 9. The plan here is just to go over them briefly, and then when we get to Q&A, if you want more detail on any of these features, we can dig deeper based on questions. But I just want to level set. Some of these features may be brand new to you. Some of these may be things that you know about and you're planning to use. But just kind of a brief description to clarify. Distribution services is probably the biggest change with version 9. This is MicroStrategy's first attempt at moving narrowcast functionality over to the intelligence server. And we say it's their first attempt because not all functionality that you currently do in narrowcast will be performed in distribution services. And specifically, what will be done in distribution services is things like web deliveries, and web send now previously was handled through the narrowcast server. Now will be completely handled by the intelligence server. But some of your more complex services that are currently set up in narrowcast with things like dynamic subscription sets, templates, and personalization, some of those services will continue to function in narrowcast. So with the upgrade, you will get distribution services functionality. We will also upgrade your narrowcast server, and you'll actually use both of those in unison until future releases of MicroStrategy. But it's MicroStrategy's stated plan to move everything to the intelligence server, and this is the first step towards that. Multi-data source is a new feature in version 9. Before version 9, you could only run reports per project from a single data source, and now it's possible to pull multiple data sources per project and even per report. So big new feature there. Object packages changes the way you move objects from environment to environment. So this is an add-on feature to Object Manager. And briefly, object packages allows you to create packages of objects, sets of objects that you want migrated together. So maybe you have a big project where you add a lot of reports, multiple attributes, multiple metrics and facts, and you can package those together into a package and deploy that from development to test environment. And then you go through your testing process there, and once you say okay, instead of having to recollect those objects, you can just migrate that object package up to the next environment if there's a stage or up into production. So this opens up a lot of opportunities for perhaps having your developers create object packages and they define those packages, and then the administrator just comes in and migrates those packages or deploys that package when the time's right. The other nice feature there is when you create these packages, you do not lock the schema. So the only time you're locking the schema is when you actually deploy. So a lot less time having to spend off hours to prevent locking schema. History list messages, starting with version 9, can now be saved to tables as opposed to just being saved to file. You can still save them to file as you had before, but you also have the ability to save those to database, which can be nice for management, backing up and restoring of those messages. Internationalization is a new feature in version 9, and this is basically you can set different aliases for your attributes and metrics and how they're displayed, and they will be displayed differently based on user groups. So the example of internationalization would be with languages, but you could also use jargon. So an example would be you have a customer attribute, and whenever you have your Spanish-speaking users logging in, you want them to see the Spanish equivalent to the word customer for the name of that attribute. And English-speaking users would just see customer. And as far as the jargons, you could have a group of users who like to see customer displayed, and another group that calls them clients or has a different term for a customer. And you can set that up through internationalization. Version 9 is the first step towards web-based administration. So user management can now be handled through the web as opposed to just through desktop. And then moving up to the right column, top of the right column, again, just like the last couple releases of MicroStrategy, they continue to move functionality to the web, especially for report development. And this is just another step towards that. So hopefully more and more users can perform all their functions on web as opposed to needing desktop, which greatly reduces administration costs. There's new enterprise manager fields with version 9, and I won't go through all of them, but some highlights are on all statistics tables. There's 3 new fields, one for day, one for hour, and one for minute. And so it makes it a lot easier to search by time frame on your statistics tables. And then the day is indexed, and it's able to be database partitioning can also be added to the day ID. And then things like transmission recording tables for narrowcast are now moved to metadata. And some other little changes to Enterprise Manager to add more data to EM. With version 9, you now have more granular admin privilege capabilities. So you can specify particular privileges to users, things like Command Manager, Enterprise Manager, or Object Manager. So you could, especially important for object packages, you can grant your developers the ability to create object packages without giving them all administrative privileges. Intelligent cubes are a big new feature in version 9. So the example here would be, so intelligent cubes is a way to predefine cache on your server, and it allows users to retrieve the results from cache as opposed to having to go down to the database. So an example would be, say 90% of your sales reports all contain the same 20 objects. You could create an intelligent cube for those 20 objects, and anytime you're running a report that contains those objects, it'll retrieve that data from cache as opposed to going to the database. And then Cube Advisor actually will monitor your usage and see what reports your users or which objects your users are using, and will actually recommend different cubes for you to create. Change journaling is another new feature in 9, and this is something that you can turn on, and it'll track the history of changes to particular objects. In the past, all we could see was last modified date, where now we can actually track back the last 5 changes to an object, when they were done, and who did those changes. So let's talk about the overall upgrade process flow, and then we'll get into some more details about this. The recommended approach that we found the best success with is obviously start with your production environment, and to duplicate that project or that production metadata into an isolated certification environment. So this would be separate hardware away from your end users, where you create a duplicate of production, and this is where you perform the bulk of your validations. So you do your basic technical validation in that environment, and then open that up to some of your project teams or anybody who's involved in validations, and they can do their in-depth validation without impacting your existing environments at all. So once you feel comfortable with the upgrade and you validated all the steps that you want to validate, you can then go on to your existing environment. So normal process flow would be to upgrade development and test and production. So a couple things to consider as you're planning the upgrade and planning your project plan for the upgrade. First thing is, what version of MicroStrategy are you currently on? The upgrade process requires that you upgrade from a minimum of MicroStrategy 8.10. So if you're on an older version, you actually need to upgrade your metadata to 8.10 and then upgrade to version 9. So if you're on an older version of MicroStrategy, just to consider that's an extra step in your upgrade. It may take a little extra time. We talked about the certification environment, so that may not be something that you have now. It may be an environment that already exists. But ideal situation here would be you have separate hardware, and that's where you perform your certification environment. Another thing to consider is how long of a development freeze your development teams can afford, as well as how long is your validation plan in each environment. So let me step back to the last slide here. And the reason your development environment. Development is now at version 9, and test and production are at lower versions of MicroStrategy. So at this point, you're no longer able to migrate objects from a higher version of MicroStrategy to a lower. So at this point, you need to be in a development freeze where no objects are moving from dev to test to prod. So you think of, you upgrade development, and the freeze starts. And then however long it takes to validate the development environment, you step through upgrade test, validate that environment, and then once you upgrade and validate production, then you can come out of that development freeze. And so depending on your validation plan, that might be a long time, and you might need to consider how long of a freeze you can afford. An alternative method to an upgrade that we've done is to, again, validate and certification, make sure we have a solid validation, we're comfortable with the upgrade in there, and then actually do the upgrade in production first. And what's nice there is now production's at version 9, test and dev are at older versions. You can still migrate objects up in an emergency situation up through dev, test, prod, because you can migrate from an older version of MicroStrategy to a newer version. And then after the production upgrade, you then have a little bit more time where you can take your time to upgrade the test and development environment. So 2 different process flows that we've had success with. So other considerations is, will a hardware upgrade be part of this upgrade? A lot of people are talking about upgrading their hardware to 64-bit, and many people are doing that along with the software upgrade. Obviously, there's a little bit of risk there in doing a lot of changes at once, so you're upgrading hardware and software at the same time. The other side is the benefit is if you're buying new hardware, you can actually use that hardware as your certification environment, do all your validation there. Once you're okay with everything, you just flip that new hardware on as your production environment. Another consideration is will performance testing be part of your upgrade plan? And if you'll be doing performance testing, obviously, if you're going to use that certification environment, you need to, in order to do a valid performance test, you're going to want to create like-for-like hardware with your production environment. And maybe point that database then at your stage or your production warehouse if possible. So something to consider when creating that certification environment. And then web customizations. With previous versions of MicroStrategy, the way web customizations have been handled is they're just written into the web code. And then when you go up into upgrade, you actually wipe out that code, and then you need to retrofit all your changes for your web customizations. Starting with version 9, you're now able to create web plugins. So that's just a plugin to the existing code. So in future upgrades, they won't overwrite those plugins. The plugins will just continue to be plugged into your web code. So this would be a good time with this upgraded version 9 to document out your web customizations, make sure you have a complete list, and then after the upgrade, you can change these into web plugins, and then future upgrades will go much smoother with the customizations. Okay, so we have our project plan in place, but we're not quite ready to upgrade quite yet. What we always recommend, and whenever we go to client sites to perform upgrades, we always have a pre-upgrade checklist, things that should be in place before your project team start working on the upgrade. Especially if you have an outside consultant coming on, the last thing you want is a person coming on site the first day and you need to chase down license keys or access. Or basically, this is a kind of a checklist of things you want in place so you can get started right away on the upgrade. So these bullets are a subset of our pre-upgrade checklist. Things like having the license keys, having the proper license keys, as well as downloading the install files to the intelligence server. That's something that can take a day or two, especially getting the licenses. And you want to have those in place before starting. Obviously, we want to back up our databases. Most important ones here are your metadata, as well as your narrowcast repositories. And then, as much as you're able to validate you're starting with an existing environment. Some of our biggest problems with upgrades are after an upgrade we have a problem, we're troubleshooting it, trying to figure out why this problem happened because of the upgrade, and eventually you go back and you test it in the old environment and find out we're actually just found a problem that's always existed, but we're just now catching it, and it gets mixed in with the upgrade and can really delay your upgrade. So MicroStrategy has tools to help you validate your metadata. That'd be ScanMD and MD Doctor. And then we also recommend any validation steps you're going to perform after the upgrade. We recommend you perform those before the upgrade to make sure that functionality you expect to work is currently working in your environment. And then important to get detailed documentation of your existing settings. So that would be things like your server level settings, project level settings, and VLDB properties, as well as documenting out your security privileges. So you can compare these after the upgrade. And then again, if performance is an important part of the validation plan, it's a good time to get good performance benchmarks. So now we're ready for the easy part, which is doing the upgrading. The first step is actually a new step. In previous versions of MicroStrategy, it was possible just to install the new version over your existing version. With version 9, it's necessary to actually uninstall your existing software and then install version 9 on your intelligence server. Yeah, MicroStrategy's recommended path is then to create a brand new set of metadata tables. This will ensure that you have the version 9 metadata tables and fields in the metadata. And then from there you then duplicate your existing metadata into that new metadata. And once you've upgraded your intelligence server, duplicated the metadata, you now connect the intelligence server to the metadata. And when you open up the project, it'll prompt you if you want to upgrade the objects. MicroStrategy will go through and upgrade all your metadata objects. So an alternative method here is to actually skip the step where you create the new metadata and just take your existing metadata and connect your intelligence server to that and upgrade the metadata at that time. What that does is it preserves the server level configuration settings. We've had a couple clients that have a large number of customized settings for server level settings, and they just thought it was better, more efficient to just upgrade the existing metadata to preserve those settings. Next step is a new step with version 9, and it needs to be done after the intelligence server has been upgraded, and before narrowcast has been upgraded. And this is a wizard as part of the upgrade process that converts all your existing web deliveries to distribution services. So these are things like Web Send Now and web scheduled deliveries. And the reason you need to do this now is once you upgrade your narrowcast server, you actually lose all these web deliveries. So this step needs to be done after the intelligence server is upgraded and before narrowcast. Once that's done and validated, and then go on and upgrade narrowcast. Upgrade your web server, retrofit any web customizations, turn them into web plugins, and then upgrade your enterprise manager. Then we're ready for validation. And we always talk about two different kinds of validation. The first is the technical validation, verifying that the basic system functionality is working. So we want to validate your settings. So you want to take your list of settings before the upgrade, compare them to your new upgrade, or new settings, and any custom settings you had previously, you want to look at those. Maybe they're out of date, so you don't change them this time, or maybe you continue to use those custom settings. And again, that's server level, project level, and VLDB. And then you want to validate your security privileges. So important note here is any new functionality becomes a new privilege in security, and by default, all those new privileges will be disabled. So you want to take a look at your existing privileges, compare them to the new ones, and then again, at that time, consider these new privileges, which users and groups do we want to grant that access to. Also important to validate your security filters, make sure that those still work after the upgrade. Step that's often overlooked but very important is validating your administrative tools, things like Object Manager, Command Manager, Schedules, and Enterprise Manager data load. And then we want to run reports from multiple sources just to validate that, yes, it's okay to run a report from desktop, run a simple report from web, and just validate that that functionality is working. Run a simple Office report. And then validate your narrowcast services and distribution services. So can you send to email, can you send a file? Make sure that basic functionality is working. Want to validate all your web customizations. And then after the upgrade, validate you can create messages, history list messages, as well as caches. And then also can you retrieve those messages and caches. And if you're in a cluster environment, we always recommend to create the cache in one node and then to retrieve them from the other node. So once you're comfortable with basic functionality, you can open up the validation to project teams, and they can do more of the detailed validation, maybe specific objects that you have in your environment, more complex reports or more complex narrowcast services that you have. And they can also do more validation of the data, comparing that the data we expect continues to show on our reports. So here I'll hurry through this. We recommend running from web, desktop, running different kinds of reports, grids, graphs, documents, dashboards, and then testing different functionality. So can you export, can you drill, page by, freeform SQL, and different kind of functionality that you have today. And that would be considered regression testing. And then you have the option to now test any of the new functionality or to wait for a separate project after the upgrade. A couple of notes that we've picked up from the upgrades that we've done. The first note is just basically to be sure to include Object Manager in your validation. There's been a lot of changes with object packages, and we just recommend that often that gets overlooked, but to definitely include that in this validation plan. There was a problem with hotfix 900 hotfix 2 related to Object Manager. It was quickly fixed and released in hotfix 3, but the note here is just there's been a lot of changes to Object Manager, so be sure to include that in validation. When we originally set up narrowcast, usually you need to inform the web server or tell the web server to allow narrowcast to send email messages that will then get sent out by the web server. By default, the web server usually does not allow messages to come from servers, so we had to tell it to allow email messages from our narrowcast server. Now at Distribution Services, we'll be sending messages from the iServer and the narrowcast server, so we need to tell the web server to allow messages from iServer as well. Web deliveries we talked about must be migrated prior to narrowcast install. Existing deliveries get deleted and moved over to Distribution Services. And as part of that wizard, you have an option to allow use Distribution Services privilege. And we talked about how security privileges are disabled by default. So this will actually enable that privilege for any user who could send narrowcast can now use Distribution Services. Note here that starting with version 9.0.1, it will no longer be backwards compatible, which so once you upgrade your intelligence server, you also need to upgrade web server and desktop. And a couple of our clients, that's a big deal. They would often upgrade the intelligence server and wait till a later date for the web server. Many environments, it's not an issue at all because they're going to upgrade all components at the same time anyway. Document definitions and schedule definitions have changed with version 9. As part of the upgrade process is just a wizard that will upgrade those definitions for you. If you don't do that during the upgrade, it is possible to do it later. If you don't do it, your schedules will continue to run, but you just won't be able to see them in Schedule Monitor. And then history list definitions have also changed, so there's an option to update your history list messages to version 9 format. And then just a note to consider, plan for, if you do use history listed tables, those records can get rather large, and so be sure to plan for potential large growth in that history list database. So that was it for the material for today.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Well, that concludes our presentation portion of the webinar. Just a quick note, we're probably by the end of today, I will be sending out a quick 3-question survey just so you can give us some feedback on today's session. We'd also like some input from you guys on what other webinars you'd like to see from us. Also, if you'd like a copy of this presentation, just simply indicate that in your reply along with your survey answers. So before we begin the Q&A, I'd just like to say a few quick words about Lancet. We've been in the business of BI since 1997, and from day one, a large portion of our business has been focused around MicroStrategy. We have over 30 experienced and MicroStrategy certified professionals delivering services to companies large and small across the nation. Our depth of experience has allowed us to create an array of service lines customized for each area of your MicroStrategy deployment, integration, implementation, and management. So for more information about any of those services, or if you need help with any aspect of your upgrade to V9, feel free to contact us or visit us at our website at lancetsoftware.com. We'll also be at MicroStrategy World in less than 2 weeks here. So if you happen to be going, please stop by our booth and say hi. So with that, Matt, we can start taking some questions.
Okay, yeah, so we've had a couple come in on chat, but we'll open up the phone lines, and if anybody has any questions,
unmuted,
feel free to just jump in. We'll read a couple that have come in through the chat. First question is, does the Distribution Services conversion tool convert all narrowcast services? And the answer to that is no, that it only converts the web deliveries and web send now. So some of your more complex narrowcast services with like dynamic subscription sets, those do not get touched, and those will continue to work in narrowcast.
And we also have a related question. What's the service impact of distribution services on the intelligence server? With this initial phased release of distribution services, since it does not cover 100% of what narrowcast previously did, the impact is fairly light. Obviously, obviously there is minimal impact, but we would expect the performance, the resource overhead to increase as they add additional features to distribution services such as Excel templates, dynamic subscription sets, etc.
Hopefully that answers that question. If any of these questions we don't answer them in full, you have follow-ups, feel free to jump in. We had a question on should I upgrade now or wait until the first service release? And our answer has always been, a lot of companies have corporate policies that they just wait for the first service level release. And if that's your policy, that's fine. Like we said, we've installed a lot of our single server clients, and we haven't had an issue yet where we've backed off the upgrade. So we've gone to 9.0. There have been little things here and there, especially with things like dashboards, but they haven't been major showstoppers that have caused us to back off the upgrade. At this point, I actually got an email today from MicroStrategy saying that they plan to release 9.01 within the next 2 to 3 weeks, and I would not be at all surprised if they actually released it during MicroStrategy World. So at this point, maybe it's worth waiting that 2 weeks to upgrade to 9.01. But 9.00 has been good. It's the first of a major release, so there's been little things here and there, but like I said, nothing major.
We have another question that just came in. What's the biggest intelligent cube that you have seen with the current customer? The majority of our direct customers, they've been very small to several gigabytes in size. That said, I do know that MicroStrategy has been testing in-house, and they have tested up to 32 gigabytes. So there's definitely some room to grow them.
Yeah, we've had a lot of questions about intelligent cubes in general, and it is a nice feature. The thing to think about there is you're going to be storing more in memory and more on your intelligence server. It's going to take a little bit more resourcing on your intelligence server, but again, a great feature. It allows you to increase its performance. Allows you to take the database out of the equation for performance.
We have a question in chat. Did the structure of the metadata tables change, or did they just add additional tables to support the new functionality? The answer is it's a combination of both. With each incremental upgrade, there are minor revisions made to the existing tables, but the majority of the changes were made in the form of additional tables being added for distribution services as well as change journaling.
Yeah, I know some people had talked about they had written SQL scripts over their metadata. We expect those to still work, but like Jesse said, there might be small tweaks.
Another question came in. What are the licensing implications for MicroStrategy with building a certification environment? For most customers out there, it's a non-issue because they're on named user licensing, which means that you can install the applications on as many servers as you want. You're just restricted by the number of named users you have. If you're on CPU-based licensing, which is a little bit older licensing model, but there are definitely some customers still out there who use it, it's a little more complicated. But hopefully with version 9, you would be moving away from that model.
Take a quick pause here if there's any questions on the phone. A question about are the conversion tools you talked about part of the upgrade process? And yes, they are. So those conversion tools are for distribution services we talked about, history list messages, schedule definitions, and document definitions. So those are all wizards, checkboxes as part of the upgrade process. Basically, no reason not to check those and have those objects updated. If you do skip that part in the upgrade, it is possible to update those after the upgrade as well. But it is a wizard, it's a conversion tool, it's part of the process, and very well streamlined.
We have a question that just came in from chat. Do any of our 32-bit Windows clients use intelligent cubes, and if so, how big are those cubes? For the most part, they're fairly small. Obviously, that's limited to the 32-bit restriction of 4 gigabytes of memory on a Windows server. With that limitation, the iServer is going to take around a gigabyte or so. So you're quickly down to 3 gigs. The OS is going to take at least 1, so you're down to around 2 gigabytes. Just in available memory. What we've seen from experience is the biggest ones we've seen on Windows servers are probably around 1 gig. We have another question that came in regarding change journaling and where is that information stored. There's actually additional tables created in the metadata database where all the change journaling information is stored. And the amount of space required for that will vary. When you initially set up change journaling, you have the option to enable or disable certain features. How much logging and recording do you want? And that'll greatly affect the growth of your database.
Yeah, another point on change journaling is people have asked if you can actually recover back from multiple changes. So let's say you have 5 changes of a particular object. Can you know that the second one was a good change? Can you go back to that change? And currently the answer is no. But I know that make no guarantees for MicroStrategy, I guess. But that is in the roadmap to be able to then recover back to multiple changes ago as part of change journaling.
So a question, how long of a time period would you recommend for an upgrade? We've done upgrades that vary in size from 1 server for iServer Web and Narrowcast all on 1 box to 100 plus servers across an environment. So obviously the answer is it depends on size. It depends on not only the number of users but the number of servers you have, the uptime requirements. Does everything need to be done after hours, or can some of the work be done during the day? Are you doing an in-place upgrade, meaning that you'll be replacing and overwriting the existing version, or will you be bringing in all new hardware, which means you can stand up that new environment next to the existing platform, which allows a little or actually a lot more leeway as far as testing schedules go. So I guess the short answer to that question would be anywhere from probably 2 days on up.
Yep. We've done upgrades that take almost a year. A lot of it has to do with how many different groups of users do you have, how extensive of a validation plan do they want to do, and it's coordinating all those different users and validations. Got a question about virtualization. So virtual servers we're talking about here. Starting with version 9, VMware is certified with MicroStrategy. And their official stance on other virtualization software, and prior to version 9 with VMware, has always been they haven't officially certified it. And what that means is if you have a problem, support may ask you to recreate that problem in a non-virtual environment, and that's the official stance. And the reality is we've never come across a situation where support wouldn't support an issue until we tested it on a non-virtual environment. It usually doesn't even come up in a conversation. So we have lots of customers using virtualization in non-production environments, and we even have some using virtualization in production. So official stands, VMware certified in version 9, but we haven't seen any problems with virtualization. In fact, we recommend it for the certification environment, and easier to get resources for testing.
A question that just came in: if the server is at 8.1.2 but one of the clients is still on 8.0.3, does the client have to upgrade to 8.1.2 before upgrading to version 9? The answer to that is no, they do not. With the older version, 8.0.3 in this example, you would require an incremental hop to upgrade your metadata to 8.1.2, but at the client end, you would simply uninstall 8.0.3 and replace it with the 9.0 or 9.0.1 desktop.
Any other questions on the phone before we keep reading?
We have a question: are there any Enterprise Manager reports to see change journaling data? That is a very good question. I am not aware of any out-of-the-box reports that are built specifically for that purpose, but obviously you could customize reports and build them yourself. And we'll actually look into that a little bit further, and we can follow up with you via email on that one.
Couple points on licensing. People have had confusion and questions about in the past. Multi-data source is a new feature, and so therefore it requires an additional license. Think of it as similar to OLAP services, where you're licensed for the intelligence server, but you also need a license if you want to use OLAP services. So multi-data source is an additional license. Administrator is also licensed a little bit differently now. There's a separate license for Enterprise Manager, Command Manager, and Object Manager. If you are currently licensed for Administrator, you automatically are licensed for all three of the split out administration's licenses in version 9. So it's not a problem if you're already licensed for Administrator, you get those three. And then just an important point, if you're also upgrading to 64-bit, there is a different license. You have your Intelligence Server versus Intelligence Server Universal. Intelligence Server Universal is the one that allows you to use 64-bit capability, as well as on the web. There's a web license versus web universal license. So a couple things to sort out when you're planning.
We have a question: how do you upgrade your schedules to support version 9 functionality? You actually are prompted with the option to upgrade schedules during the configuration wizard when you're configuring your intelligence server. That's also the place where you're going to be prompted to upgrade any projects as well as add the distribution services functionality. And one note on that, in version 9.0.1, which will be out in a few weeks here, they have streamlined that process quite a bit. In 9.0, there was some additional manual steps, whereas in 9.0.1, they added it into one wizard. So they simplified it quite a bit, which was a nice addition.
Question here is, have you seen changes in the way SQL is generated in version 9? And the answer is, for the most part, no, but there is some enhanced SQL generation features in version 9. And so this actually ties in with Integrity Manager. So if you're not using Integrity Manager, it's a separately licensed tool that MicroStrategy offers, and it's really nice for validating upgrades. And what it does is you go into Integrity Manager and you connect to two separate projects. So in the upgrade case, you would connect to production and connect to your certification environment that's upgraded. And you say, I want to run the same report, one in the version 8 and one in version 9. And Integrity Manager will go through and it'll compare the data results as well as the SQL. And then it'll highlight any changes in the SQL that you see. So there is some changes. There supposed to be improvements to the SQL, but you may see a difference in SQL once you upgrade to version 9. But Integrity Manager is a great way to highlight those changes as well as a good validation tool for your data.
We have a question, is Internet Explorer 8 supported by MicroStrategy 9? The answer to that, it is not certified by MicroStrategy for version 9.0.0. Their recommended workaround is to enable compatibility mode in the browser, which will essentially emulate Internet Explorer 7. That being said, it will be supported in 9.0.1.
We've got a couple minutes left here. We can keep going through some of these questions. I just want to pause for kind of a last call for any questions on the phone. And then we'll keep going through anything we get on the chat and drop off or stay on as long as you want. So this is a first webinar we've done in a while, and we're hoping to do more of these. If there's certain materials you'd like to hear us do a webinar on, please let us know. Give us some suggestions, and any feedback you have about this webinar, we'd certainly appreciate it.
We have a question that came in through chat. How effective is the new version of ScanMD, or are there any updates to it? I'm not aware of an update being released with 9.0.1. It does not follow the same release cycle as, say, the intelligence server or the other components of the product suite. There was an upgrade close to the release of 9.0, I believe shortly before 9.0.0, that did allow the ScanMD wizard to identify a lot more additional issues that the older version did not. We were seeing situations where we were advised to run ScanMD to fix an issue, it wouldn't see it. However, when we use the new version of ScanMD, it would pick it up, fix it without issue.
A little bit different look and feel. Takes a little getting used to, but I think once we got used to it, it's a better tool.
Yeah.
At least in my opinion.
Yeah, and that should be available today to download from MicroStrategy support. If you go log into the knowledge base and search for ScanMD, you should be able to find a link to download that.
A couple other new features that we cut out of our presentation, but before version 9, you could not, users could miss their password over and over, and it would never lock out users. You can now set that to 3 strikes and you get locked out, or you can set that to any number. So if they, if you want to say five missed passwords and then you lock their IDs. So it's nice for passing any internal security audits. There's also an option to do find and replace on privileges. So especially with ACLs, this is nice. You can go and do a find and replace on, change it from this group to another group. So it helps with the management of ACLs.
Okay, we're just about at 2 o'clock, and I think we've gotten through most of the questions on chat. So we'll just give one final last call. If you have a question, now's your chance. We've got the experts here, so shout it out. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and conclude the presentation. If you did submit a question through chat that we did not get to, we will email you personally with our answer. So, no questions? All right. Well, thanks, everybody. We appreciate you tuning in. And if you think of something, a question after the fact, feel free to contact us. Thank you.